So I will welcome you now to our Upper Wenatchee Pilot Project virtual field trip. And I really wish we were out kicking woods or kicking rocks out on the project, but we can't visit the site today. But I will introduce the project team members who are going to be part of today's panel. So the panel members today will include Jeff Rivera, who's the district ranger of the Wenatchee River District, Lloyd McGee, who's the Eastern Washington Forest Program Manager for the Nature Conservancy, Patrick Haggerty, the Forestry Program Manager for Cascadia Conservation District, Pete Weir, Forest Silviculturist for the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, Don Yuki, I believe Don's with us here, the wildlife biologist for the Wenatchee River Ranger District, and Chuck Hersey, the Forest Health Planning Section Manager for the Washington Department of Natural Resources. Now we're going to start our field trip with an 18-minute video of the project area. That's our field trip. The video was produced by North 40 Productions in Wenatchee, and the funding was provided by Chelan County, by the U.S. Forest Service, and by the Washington Resource Conservation and Development Council. So thanks to all of those organizations. So you will have a chance to enjoy the view. And then after that, each of the panelists, many of whom are also on the video, will describe his role in making the project happen. And please put your questions in the chat, and we'll answer as many questions as possible when the speakers have finished. And so we'll start with the video, and Sean, I think you have the video and you can start that for us. Great.
We started the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative in 2012, in which we had 8 member organizations really come together and help develop the idea and the concept behind the collaborative. We all agreed that it'd be about forest health resiliency, and it would be about bringing as many organizations together to help create resources and resource sharing. We are increasing the pace and scale. That is our goal, to increase pace and scale of forest restoration.
In Washington State, we have a lot of different land management agencies managing our forest land, and it makes it really complicated to implement restoration projects at a landscape level, which is really the direction that we need to be going into. And so what we're working on is increasing the coordination and collaboration between different land management agencies in order to get these projects completed with the pace and scale that we need to ensure that our forests will remain healthy.
In 2015, we had the worst fire season in the history in Washington State, particularly Eastern Washington. We had over 1 million acres burned in forests and shrub steppe. It was devastating to many homes, structures were lost, and unfortunately, there were lives lost. There was so much pressure on the Forest Service and other land management agencies. What are we going to do about this? In the fall of 2015, there was a forum that came together, and that forum was called Wildfires and Us. And we had over 400 citizens from Chelan County and beyond come to that forum, and we had the Public Lands Commissioner, the Forest Supervisor, and others that were all there speaking and listening. And what we heard loud and clear was, what can the Forest Service do to be more proactive to reduce these fuels and try to get these uncharacteristic wildfires under control? And the Lands Commissioner, Public Lands Commissioner, brought this to the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative because we were already working on these kind of projects, and asked, is there a special pilot project we could take on? And we said, you know, there is a project we've been thinking about, and it is up the Upper Wenatchee landscape, and it was Lower Chihuahua and Big Meadow. That was about 30,000 acres, those 2 watersheds. And we said, okay, what if we did another 2 watersheds in addition to those 2, which would be Beaver Creek Wenatchee River and Lake Wenatchee watersheds. That would be 75,000 acres. That is the largest scale that the forest had ever been to. So the next question was, can we as a collaborative partnership help bring funds to pay for this large landscape scale restoration? We went out, and after a year, a little bit more than a year, we ended up with $2.16 million. And that funding is helping to pay for this project. But in addition to the landscape on the Forest Service, those funds also help pay for treks, prescribed fire training, fuel reductions on Chelan County land, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife land, helped to develop the Lake Wenatchee Fire Adaptive Community, and 11,000 acres of prescribed burning on Forest Service land. So with all of that, we moved forward. We were able to contract a NEPA team.
For the first time, the Forest Service is contracting out a very large NEPA project like this, and we're able to help them fill those contracts and get that work done at a faster pace and scale than had we relied on the existing resources at the local Forest Service offices. So we're all working together on it, and in so doing, we're doing a much bigger project much faster on a large piece of real estate in Chelan County.
There's some really good community outcomes that will come from this. It's going to protect the communities, it's going to protect the landowners particularly, and it's going to provide many jobs. And that is another part of the goal of this large landscape project.
The Upper Wenatchee Pilot Project is a collaborative forest restoration project. We've worked with many collaborative partners in developing this project. This project is also a condition-based approach to forest management. We look at and have assessed numerous different forest conditions and a suite of tools to help us get those conditions to a more desirable objective. We've looked at different types of commercial thinning, non-commercial thinning, prescribed fire. This project also has a large aquatic restoration component of this that addresses road impacts to streams and riparian areas. It addresses aquatic passage and conditions to help with endangered species within the project area. The project itself will be implemented over many years, so it's not something that you'll see project work all at once, but over time.
So this planting area, which covers in total about 75,000 acres, it's a very diverse landscape with lots of complexities and issues. We can only complete this work successfully in collaborating with local publics and other stakeholders and partners and cooperators. It's just real important that the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative has really been instrumental in helping us yard all the stakeholders up and giving us that vision and that focus that encompasses the needs of all those involved.
Needing to work across boundaries and ownerships, it's a big part of the equation.
One of the tools we can use is called the Good Neighbor Authority, which basically allows the state to help implement projects on federal land.
I think one of the exciting things about this project for me is that there's been landowners and community members that have been at the table from the start. There's been community groups like the Lake Wenatchee Fire Adapted Community Group, the local fire district, the Chumstick Wildfire Coalition.
Trying to mesh the human needs with the ecological needs is something that we're trying to do in this project. Our local fire district partners are working very closely with us. It's something that we take very seriously.
We know that healthy forests and healthy communities pretty much go hand in hand. How the forest goes, we go. Money from the Upper Wenatchee Pilot Project helps sponsor a number of programs through that, which has allowed us to do home assessments for private property and private property owners within the community. We have a seasonal chipper and a crew that goes around and mitigates yard waste for residential properties. And we've been able to start a fire adapted communities program where community members work to make their homes safer and the community more resilient to fire.
I've been the Firewise leader here for 5 years, and of those 5 years, 3 years in a row, we've had what we call a community cleanup. I think that people are beginning to see how important it is that the property around us is treated, if you will, or managed, if you will. But I also think that it's coming into the forefront for people that they need to do something themselves. From when you first came here and did our risk assessment, if you go through and look now, I think you'll see quite a bit of improvement. And I'm happy to report that.
Over the last couple of years, we've seen improvements through this program of homeowners getting on board and preparing their properties and cleaning them up. This year was better than last year, and next year will be better than this year has been. We're hoping that that continues to become part of the lifestyle and part of the culture here at Lake Wenatchee.
So this is an example of a dry forest, multi-storied, multi-layered forest condition. So we have ponderosa pine, we've got grand fir, we've got these shade-tolerant species that have come up in the understory. And so with this project, we're designing our treatments to come in from below and remove these shade-tolerant species and really, promote the protection of these large legacy trees that are so important to this landscape. So this is an example of where we would have commercial harvest. The byproduct of that would be this smaller diameter grand fir.
2.7 million acres need to be restored in eastern Washington. That's a huge number. So the challenge is, how do we pay for it, and how does a collaborative help bring resources and funding? So we realize that there's also the wood supply that comes out of a project that can, actually utilize the revenue from the commercial timber value that can turn around and pay for the ecologically sound restoration. We have full support from Nature Conservancy, and we ask other conservation organizations to be supportive of this really important work.
By thinning from below, taking the small diameter trees, we're going to reduce the fuel load, and that will dramatically reduce the risk of a catastrophic wildfire. The small diameter trees that we are thinning not only will pay for stewardship type projects, but it has value in the market.
And then in the end, we're expecting to have a pretty open understory, which is much more resilient should wildfire come through this landscape. The ladder fuels won't be there, and it won't provide those ladders to climb into those upper canopies to impact those larger tree components that we desire.
The connecting, protecting, and restoration work really needs to go hand in hand and has to be part of a larger collaborative process to really endure it. And so our goal is to really help the Forest Service work with communities, work in a collaborative fashion, and really look at the broader landscape. Key concerns are late soil reserve habitat, older forests with really a lot of diversity, both for certain endangered species like spotted owls, and also recovering species like the fisher that prefer old growth habitat. And so any treatment within these really special places needs to be done cautiously. There was a work group formed within the collaborative to work with the district to really talk through some of those concerns, to look at the range of treatments and what the landscape really needed, not just an individual stand.
The Northwest Forest Plan guides us to manage this to protect like successional habitat and spotted owls. So this project, we're trying to balance protecting those owls with treating the landscape to make it more resilient to primarily wildfire. While we do that, we have prioritized habitat across the area, and we're going to stay out of areas that are the highest priority. So those areas that have been used by owls recently will get either light or no treatment. So in order to map higher quality habitat, allow us to protect the most valuable habitat as well as identify the less desirable habitat to treat.
One of the primary objectives of the collaborative and the aquatic work group was to build a robust aquatic habitat assessment and integrate Forest Service processes with local and state salmon recovery and watershed plans. In order to do that, the collaborative was able to leverage resources to hire an independent firm, Kramer Fish Sciences, to conduct an aquatic assessment. They walked many miles of stream throughout the project area, collected data, and identified specific restoration opportunities. The report they put together really helped build many of the projects that you're going to find in the environmental assessment.
So through the initial stream surveys that were completed in the project area, we found that about half of the stream reaches had inadequate large wood, not enough deep, cool pools, and some sort of riparian disturbance, which basically means that the fish habitat isn't where we want it to be. There's a lot of opportunity for restoration. So all of that data will help inform our future restoration actions. One of the other things we found through our surveys is that one of the big problem areas is culverts, stream crossings. A lot of times culverts are undersized and they are fish passage barriers, either complete or partial barriers, depending on the time of year or the size of the fish. With our culvert replacements, we frequently upgrade to what are called aquatic organism passage structures. These are culverts that have a natural stream bottom and allow fish and other aquatic organisms to pass at all times of year, regardless of size. This opens up miles of habitat. In fact, we've found that in this project area, we're going to open up about 10 miles of known fish habitat to year-round passage and up to 20 miles of potential fish habitat. These are stream sections that may have suitable fish habitat and the potential to have populations, but we've never seen before, potentially because culverts have blocked fish's ability to use those stream reaches. Since we know that there is a deficiency of large wood in a lot of our stream sections, we will be working with partners and other organizations to develop strategies to place wood structures into streams. We'll also be working to improve side channel and off channel habitat, very important for different types of salmonid species. And all of that will be based on the current data that we have in the area and also anything we find out in the field when we're doing work. So in this planning area, we have 3 ESA listed fish species: spring chinook, steelhead, and bull trout. Those are our primary species of concern, but we also have other native fish species that we are also working to restore the populations and ensure that we have healthy populations into the future.
One of the things we looked at in this project was our transportation network. It's important to us that we analyze the transportation network and make sure that we have a sustainable system that we can maintain through time without creating resource damages. There are over 380 miles of roads within the project area. Through the transportation analysis process, we identified over 65 miles of road that we can decommission that are no longer needed or are causing resource damage. We identified another 50 miles of road that we would like to maintain for storage for longer term use but are not needed right now. We surveyed most of the roads in the project area prior to starting the NEPA process. We found about 30 sites that have severe erosion or damage to them and are contributing sediment directly to streams or the drainage ditches in the drainage network. So one of the things we can do when we find high severity damage areas of a road is we can reconstruct the road to prevent it from contributing sediment directly to streams and drainage ways. In minor cases, what we need to do is just work on the drainage of the road system so that we route sediment and water off of the road into vegetated forested areas that can act as a filter and prevent that sediment from reaching streams and impacting fish habitat.
So here in north central Washington, as well as across the Pacific Northwest and across the West for that matter, we see a large need for restoration projects such as this. We've been pretty good at suppressing fires in the past and not really recognizing the value of letting fire play a natural role on the landscape. Lots of past management practices didn't look at the big picture, and they were kind of focused on a smaller geographical area without regard for the adjacent landscape. So with this project, we intend to kind of take that bigger picture look, yard up all the issues that exist, our road network, our past treatments, exclusion of fire, looking at forest health, wildlife habitats, their connectivity or lack thereof, and try and take a holistic view in conjunction with the community protection and the hazardous fuels reduction, and kind of turn the ecological tables on the trends that we see. We're hoping that this is a model for future collaboration with the public, with our cooperators, other stakeholders, our partners. It's a pilot in many ways.
All right. Well, thanks to North 40 for that excellent tour of the project area. So we're going to have, all right. We're going to have now some of our speakers talk about their roles in this project. And our first speaker is going to be Lloyd McGee from the Nature Conservancy. Lloyd, you ready?
I am.
Okay, I see you on here twice.
I guess so. I'm echoing too. You hearing that?
I don't.
Okay, I'll turn it down. Okay. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Yeah, so I wish we were out in the field, and I thought Jeff Rivera was going to be speaking here too as a district ranger. You know, my role with the Nature Conservancy and as co-chair at the time of North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative, been very much a part of that. And also, I had gotten involved in lessons learned on this pilot project. When you talk about piloting a project, you know, you've got to learn a lot of things real quick and see what works and what doesn't, what you would move into the next round of projects. And you know, we're really finding that contracting NEPA is really a challenge. You know, meeting deadlines and efficient division of work between the Forest Service, contractors, and collaborative stakeholders. The North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative stakeholders and local groups have been very involved every step of the way in the planning process for this large-scale project. And you know, it's been really interesting to have so many perspectives around the table on a project like this. One important factor that's been a challenge is that you know, Chelan County and Okanagan County is 70 to 80% Forest Service land. So sharing stewardship across boundaries, you know, has been you know, interesting, working on DNR, WDFW lands and Chelan County lands and tribal ceded lands and so forth. And what makes it challenging is that we all, as a collaborative, realize that the emphasis needs to be on the federal lands. That's where so much work needs to be done, and it takes most of our capacity just working on the federal lands alone, much less you know, reaching out to private landowners. And yet we have good partners in our collaborative that are working very regularly with you know, private landowners and people in the WUI wildland interface. So we also, as a project committee, a project work group within our collaborative, we're working on a lot of projects, not just Upper Wenatchee Pilot Project. We're working on major projects. And one big challenge that we have is we've lost pretty much all our sawmills. We have one sawmill that's down there at the very southern border, which is the Yakima Forest Products, which is a Yakima tribal mill. And that's a long haul. So our challenge is, you know, our projects, you know, have long haul distances. So how do we make revenue and, you know, bring that revenue to pay for all this restoration? So one of my roles with the Nature Conservancy, I was hired as a past industrial forester to help find a way to bring a sawmill back to Central Washington. And we have a zone of agreement within our collaborative that all of our partners, we want to find a way to bring a small diameter, mid-size sawmill to Central Washington while we support all the other mills, around the area as well that are outside of our perimeter, but we want to support those mills and bring a small diameter mill to Central Washington. And we're all, looking at how to do that. The Upper Wenatchee Pilot Project could have as much as 4 stewardship contracts that come out of that landscape, in which there may be 10 million board feet per stewardship contract. So that, is a good start. We have other projects, and you put them all together. We're hoping to get a good steady flow of byproduct wood supply coming from all these projects that would entice any investor to want to put a small diameter mill into Central Washington. So we're, focused on, finding ways of keeping a steady supply of wood products, but it's also about, the ecological restoration is the key. That's what we focus on with our forest restoration strategy. So with that, I'm gonna just finish by saying that I think we all are so appreciative of how the Wenatchee River Ranger District and the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest have been really inclusive and cooperative, and really transparent with us on this project in particular, and in all our collaboration. It's just a joy working with the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, and so I'm just saying thank you for allowing us to have great collaboration. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Connie. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lloyd. So next will be Patrick Haggerty talking about the role of the Cascadia Conservation District. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate you providing me the opportunity to participate today. My name is Patrick Haggerty, and I work for Cascadia Conservation District. I'm the forestry program manager there, and I'm on vacation with my family this week. So thanks for bearing with me. I may have limited connectivity here. So the role of the Conservation District in the collaborative really starts from, we work with private landowners on helping them plan and implement stewardship projects on their private lands. And when we work with those folks, usually on the planning process, we're starting with talking about their landowner objectives. And more often than not, in Chelan County, as you've heard many times already in the last hour, folks are neighbors with the Forest Service. And so one of their primary objectives is to see some management happening across the line, and look for opportunities for kind of that cross-boundary shared stewardship approach. So that's really how we have, and why we dove into participating in the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative originally. And as this Upper Wenatchee project started to materialize and expand through the work of the collaborative, we saw really a great opportunity to jump in and get involved. This is a landscape where, after the 2014 and 2015 fire seasons, I think we helped 17 new Firewise communities be created within this project area. And so there's a lot of interest in what people can do around their homes and their properties. There's a history of forestry and logging culture in this project area, and so there's a lot of that in the roots. Specifically for this project, Cascadia has played a role in kind of the nuts and bolts of how do we take this idea of contract NEPA and get it on the ground. And this project was a bit unique in the form of in which we received funding. It came through a partnership agreement through the Forest Service, which really required a third party to take on a lot of the administrative role and play the role of the fiscal sponsor. And so that landed on the Washington Resource Conservation and Development Council, based out of Yakima. And they worked with us to put together a small contract to do some of the nitty gritty kind of project management. So developing contracts, letting out RFPs, helping with contract review and implementation. One of the big things we worked on was tracking match for the project. So you've heard about the $1.6 million we received from
the Forest Service, but that came with some requirements and a commitment from the collaborative to track our time in all these collaborative meetings and work group meetings that we were investing and be able to show that. I think one of the exciting things for me about that was the collaborative put forth a lot from a lot of different agencies, tracking their timesheets and diligently getting those to me over the several years. But, you know, we had some local organizations that really showed a lot of financial investment as well, like the Lake Wenatchee Fire and Rescue, a local fire district, ended up providing more match to the project than any other organization, I believe. And so part of that work was developing contracts for not just development of the environmental assessment, but a lot of other pieces that go along with NEPA. So we had a contract out for LIDAR so that we could improve spotted owl habitat mapping and use for other pieces of the analysis. We did stand exams on about 11,000 acres that were done by a different private company, and a different firm did spotted owl surveys, and we were able to purchase some new equipment to try out some bioacoustic monitoring. There was some outreach done, and there were private parcel assessments done by the local fire district on structures and private lands adjacent to the Forest Service within the area. So a lot of the contract NEPA went beyond just the nuts and bolts of writing out the EA on this project. And I think it's setting us up for success in terms of a lot of cross-boundary projects as we move into the implementation phase. So I'll leave it there and pass back to you, Connie.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrick. And I do want to remind people, if you have any questions of any of these panelists, just put them in the chat. So I'm going to go next to Pete Weir. Pete's the forest silviculturist with the Okanagan Wenatchee. And he's going to talk about some of those roles. Thanks, Pete.
All right, thanks, Connie. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So as the project silviculturist, I feel that I've really played an important role with this project, starting with the terrestrial portion of the landscape evaluation, so the big picture look across the landscape, and then developing the landscape prescription. Then working with ID team specialists to define the treatment objectives and application of design features. And then also just throughout working with our partners, through the planning stages, and then now we're, initiating our implementation. Although we don't have a decision yet, we're starting to nibble on it anyway. And then we'll be following up with a monitoring program. And so briefly, I just wanted to describe a little bit of the landscape evaluation. So that, again, this is the big look. And the way we do this is through photo interpretation. So we collect a whole series of different stand components through aerial imagery, and we run those through scripts, and we generate what's called derived attributes. And these are, important values in the forest, whether it's wildlife habitat or forest structure, insect and disease vulnerability, fire potential. And so it kind of gives us an indication of, how the landscape is set up, and we're able to compare those with reference conditions. And certainly, the amount and spatial arrangement of those vegetation components are very important, since they drive the disturbance processes, kind of what Hesberg was speaking to earlier. And so then moving on from that's our existing condition. We start working on our landscape prescription. And so that is prepared to address the departed attributes and set them on a path, for correction. So typically through active management. I guess as an example for this project, we have a very contiguous overabundance of the multi-layered forest conditions. And so that in turn has an elevated amount of and continuity for for crown fire potential, along with increased insect potential, say for spruce budworm outbreak. And then also our larger diameter tree component is lacking, and due to the overstock conditions, we're not likely to get there very easily. So that's kind of the landscape evaluation, landscape prescription. Then, secondly, I work closely with the wildlife biologists, fuels planners, and partners to bring that landscape prescription down to the project level. And so to do that, we described a series of forest conditions. And so these are bins that contain, a description of the departed forest structures, and then the associated derived attributes that I spoke of. And so again, some big ones are the fire risk and insect vulnerability. We identified these primarily through aerial imagery. And then kind of a key piece with this project is, we've acknowledged that this is our best estimate of where these areas are on the landscape, but as we go into implementation, we'll be able to adapt and treat the condition for what it actually is on the ground. And then as far as implementation, like I said, we don't have a signed decision, but we are wrapping our head around our initial treatments. We've developed desired conditions and stand objectives associated with those conditions. We've got preliminary sealed prescriptions to meet those stand objectives. We've been walking the ground, probably covered about 3,000 acres last summer, and things seem to be lining up pretty well with what we expect to see, or what we predicted those stand conditions were going to be, and then what we're seeing on the ground. And then I also wanted to mention some of the partnering opportunities. As Patrick mentioned, the stand exam contract, that was fantastic. It took a load off of the Forest Service contracting acquisition program by going through RC&D. We are short on sale prep folks on the district and on the forest, frankly. So we were able to request funds through an all lands restoration grant that went through the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative. We granted the money from DNR. And this one's a little complicated. And then those funds went to Chelan County, and then Chelan County actually advertised and awarded the contract. And then we, the Forest Service, are doing the compliance for that. So that was an interesting effort. And then the DNR has really been providing tools and assisting us in as we refine some of those conditions and prescriptions, along with providing some staff to work on some of this initial sale prep work. And then the collaborative, I mean, they've been there, we've been working together throughout the entire planning process, lots of touch points with them. And so it's been great working with that group as well. And then one last thing, I'll put a plug in. We have a vacancy out there for a TMA, so a timber manager in the Leavenworth office. It closes on April 9th. So if anybody's interested, take a look at USA Jobs. All right, thanks.
It sounds like a great job, Pete.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Jeff Rivera is still trying to log on, and he will be with us. Oh, there he is. Okay, he shows up as Pete Weir, but it's really Jeff.
I've been logged on since the beginning, but I'm showing up as Pete.
Well,
so I don't know what's going on there.
Tell us about your role in the Upper Wenatchee pilot project, Jeff.
Well, okay. Then Pete, thanks for that shameless plug. We really need to fill these jobs. There's multiple jobs available. So my name is Jeff Rivera. I'm the district ranger on the Wenatchee River Ranger District, and I've been involved with the Upper Wenatchee pilot since the beginning. I've actually been involved with the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative since the beginning. I've been here 10 years. So we saw that video, which kind of really does a good job of showcasing and showcasing the project and highlighting the reasons why we're undertaking this work. It's really too bad that we couldn't go out there in person right now, but I would invite you all to, when conditions allow, get a hold of me. I would love to show you around the landscape out there. It's just a wonderful project. There's a lot of complexities, a lot of hard work has taken place, and I think it would be good to show you folks on the ground once conditions allow. So, again, that video did highlight a lot of the reasons why we're undertaking this work, and then listening to Lloyd and Patrick about the collaborative piece, getting things set up. And I'm sure Pete and Don and others have more interesting things to say about this work than myself. But let me tell you a little bit about my perspective from a line officer, the line officer's role. So we heard about the forest health issues, the fuels reduction, aquatic restoration, and the pilot nature of this project. So a big piece of one of our objectives, and a big piece of this project, is kind of a role model or a basis or a framework for collaboration, right? For future collaboration. And that's a big piece. I would think that, so there's a lot of good work that's taken place, right? I would think that kind of my biggest contribution so far is just kind of setting that stage for collaboration, both internally and externally. It's not an easy thing to do to yard up all those complexities and hear all the voices that from the stakeholders that have something to contribute in a project of this scale, magnitude, and complexity. So sharing my operational space and that decision space with others, it doesn't really come easy, but it's well worth it in the end. And Lloyd talked about lessons learned, and I think we've learned some valuable lessons, and we're meeting that goal of kind of a model for future collaboration. So yeah, certainly that's a big part of it that doesn't often get mentioned when we're talking the science, right? The project tends to, or one of the project goals is to kind of mesh those ecological needs with the human needs on that landscape. We see highly altered landscape with lots of development, lots of private inholdings, and in the past, the Forest Service hadn't been the best at hearing all those views and values. We were very science focused, and the social aspect, the socio-political issues didn't always ring as loud as some of the ecological issues we're trying to address. So the collaboration piece is just so huge, and I think it's incumbent upon the line officer, the deciding officer, to set that stage to accept others into that operating space and allow that to happen. Certainly, the collaborative has been instrumental in helping me see the bigger picture and the full scope and spectrum of needs out there. So yeah, I don't know. I can't contribute much more than that to this discussion right now. I know others have more interesting things to say, but so I'll just turn it over to you, Ani.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. And so I think next we're going to have Don Yuki. Don is the wildlife biologist for the project.
Good afternoon, everybody.
District. Okay, so we don't have a video of you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm also very remote, so just happy to be here at all. As Connie said, I'm the district wildlife biologist. I have been on the Wenatchee district for almost 20 years now. This is about the 5th larger landscape restoration project I've worked on this district, although as Lloyd said, this project is quite a bit larger than others we've tackled to date. So a lot of folks have already touched on some of the things I'm going to say, but as a wildlife biologist, the spotted owl is usually our biggest challenge. It's a listed species. It's not doing so well. And its habitat is not necessarily the most resilient out there. As folks have worked in this country for a while know, we've had a lot of ingrowth, and a lot of that has made better spotted owl habitat, while at the same time it's not necessarily being ecologically sustainable. So what a big part of my job is, and working with folks like Pete, trying to balance protection of spotted owl, leaving some of their habitat on the landscape, and also breaking up some of those other portions of the landscape, making them more resilient, which in turn leaves the patches that we leave more specifically for spotted owls and other species like fisher that use that, those denser stands. They're going to be more sustainable as well, at least at a landscape level. To help that out, as I think Lloyd and Patrick both mentioned, that the collaborative has helped with some funding to get LIDAR, which allowed us to have more precise, more accurate mapping, owl habitat mapping. So we know where those patches are that are helped higher priority to maintain. The DNR has helped out as well in some of their modeling to look at again what portions of the landscape are more resilient to fire. We've incorporated some of that information. Spotted owl surveys, knowing where owls have been on this landscape or are now on this landscape, is another big portion of that puzzle. At one time, we had 20 home ranges of owls that overlapped this 75,000 acres. Current surveys show there's only 2 individual owls out there. So that's another one of the challenges. We're weighing that. We still need to maintain habitat for spotted owls, but of course we don't have what we had 20 years ago. So that's another balancing act. But part of that is getting back to the surveys. As technology evolves, science evolves, bioacoustics is an evolving survey technique for a lot of wildlife species as well as, and spotted owl is amongst them. We've been piloting that on this district for the last 3 years on this project. That's being that pilot is being expanded to the entire region, or which is essentially the entire range of the spotted owl this year. So we were ahead of them by a couple of years. So we're sharing a lot of information we've learned on this project with other forests. And in order to get to this point, the collaborative has helped get some of those bioacoustic monitors in the early years, facilitated by RC&D and the Conservation District. So yeah, I want to shout out to them for helping us. This bioacoustic technique is better for the owls. It's safer for the owl crews. It is better at detecting owls on the landscape, and in the long run, it's more efficient. It's cheaper as well. There's a bigger upfront cost, and that's what one thing that collaborative helped us out, at least with the initial purchasing of these units. Yeah, I think there's of course a lot of other wildlife species we are considering with the management of this with this project, but the spotted owl is the one we spend the most time on, and is the one that's probably the most challenging to integrate with ecological restoration. And I think I'll turn that back to you, Connie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Don. It's really interesting how that technology has evolved. So I think we have with us still Chuck Hersey from the Washington DNR Forest Health Planning Section Manager. Chuck, are you with us? Yes. All right. So I can't, you're muted, Chuck. Can you?
Am I double mute? There, that was a dreaded double mute.
Okay.
Said asking me if I'm here is an existential question, but my computer was updating, and so I was sort of locked out for a while listening on the phone, but life worked out, and here I am, so you get to see my face. So good afternoon. Thanks, Connie. Thanks, everyone, for inviting me here to talk about the Upper Wenatchee pilot project and the state's role in that. I sort of refer to this project as collaboration on steroids. Been a lot of partners doing a lot of different parts, as you've heard about. From the state's perspective, it's a very important landscape. It's part of our 20-year Forest Health Strategic Plan, one of our priority watersheds. And so we released that plan in 2017. The strategic plan was developed with a lot of partners, a lot of collaboration, and this project sort of started around the same time, as really recognizing one of the key things I think a couple folks have mentioned is that the scale of the forest health problem is quite huge in Eastern Washington, and certainly a lot of critical forest health issues come to play in the Upper Wenatchee watershed. There's a lot of dense, overstocked forest conditions that are very high fire risks. Some of the highest fire risk in all of Oregon and Washington actually exists in that watershed. A lot of critical habitat for fish, for the spotted owl, a lot of communities and homes nearby and nested within the forest. And so it's a very high priority to get some work done. And we've been quite pleased to work with partners in the forest. DNR, we're also part of the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative. It really takes a village, apparently, to restore a landscape. And so working with a lot of partners there. I think if you've been, probably most of the people on this webinar haven't been tracking the environmental assessment process, but as been mentioned, it's sort of the largest restoration project in terms of scale on the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. And the forest is really planning at the scale of what the landscape needs, tens of thousands of acres of different types of treatments, whether it's non-commercial thinning, commercial thinning, prescribed fire, managed wildfire. All those different tools are going to have to be used to restore the landscape on that scale, certainly. DNR, our specific role in this project, like I said, we participate in the collaborative. My team specifically, I manage a team of scientists and planners, and we've done quite a bit of analysis work on Upper Wenatchee, as it's one of our priority planning areas. We assess the forest health treatment need across the planning area, as well as produced, fire risk data sets, drought vulnerability data sets, landscape treatment priority, a bunch of different data sets that the Forest Service is using in various ways to help inform their planning. We heard on the video from our DNR federal lands program. It's getting confused, right? But that's what shared stewardship is, right? We're crossing the streams here. So our federal lands program, sometimes referred to as Good Neighbor Authority, they've been doing a lot of work in Upper Wenatchee. Pete Weir mentioned that state funding through a grant program has gone actually to Chelan County to basically do pre-sale layout work on a 1,300 acre timber sale, that once that decision is signed late this summer, early fall, the timber sale will be ready to go. And so to me, shared stewardship, that's what we're doing in the Upper Wenatchee pilot. You got to be willing to try new things, which I think we definitely are doing here, and bring a lot of different tools to the table. And, I think we're really figuring out what planning at the landscape scale means. Now, once the decision's signed, the work doesn't stop. We need to implement at the landscape scale, and that's probably harder and longer process as well, and going to continue to need the partnerships to be creative, use the various tools, try out new things. And so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chuck. Glad you could be here. So we do have one question in the chat from Bob Chicken. And Lloyd, you're probably going to be the one to answer this. Bob wants to know, what is the investment needed for a small log mill?
Sure. Got the echo going.
Yeah, I see you on here.
Bob, so it's a convenient number. Can you hear me? Okay, Connie, you're hearing me? Okay. That's a convenient number, actually. If it's a capacity for a mill, it'd be about 50 million board feet. It'd be about $50 million, an investment like that. If it's 80 million board feet, it'd be about an $80 million investment. So it's a pretty convenient ratio there. You know, we've been talking about a mid-size, which would be somewhere around that 50, 60 million board feet and annually. And you know, that's probably in that, you know, 50, 60 million dollar investment, you know, to get the sawmill itself in place.
Okay, well, that does make the math kind of easy. Thanks, Lloyd. So I don't see any other questions right now. If anyone wants to put another one in, this would be the time. Okay, here's one more. What do you anticipate will be the biggest challenges as implementation begins, both ecologically or socially or economically? And I think anybody can address that one. And a related question, what does the implementation timeline look like? And that would be for this project, for the Upper Wenatchee.
Hey, I can start out with some of this, Connie, if that's okay. So frankly, right now we're a little short on staff. So really, it's just getting out there and validating our assumptions that we've made in identifying those conditions that referred to, and so that's just kind of our initial hurdle. But like I said, the work that we have been doing is lining up very well. So we are feeling good about our assumptions. Socially, I'm going to let Jeff speak to that. But then as far as timeline goes, I think for the actual mechanical treatments, we're probably looking at about 15 years. And then subsequent work beyond that, such as, you know, maintenance, burning, and whatnot. Oh man, there's another question. The actual footprint, so 75,000 acres, that's the entire perimeter of the planning area. I think there's only 50 to 55,000 acres of federal lands. And with that, I think we're going to touch you know, potentially more like 35,000-ish acres. Jeff, did you want to speak to some of the social aspects of the project?
Sure, I can. I think the question was in regards to greatest challenge.
Yes.
Ecologically, socially, whatever. So socially, right? So I think we've already met a lot of that challenge, and that's yarding everybody up and hearing from everybody. A big part of this work has been kind of garnering that public and stakeholder support for going so large, and for going collaboratively, and for going condition-based NEPA. Those things have all been pretty challenging. I guess that we're facing one big hurdle right now, and that's getting the decision signed, right? So once we wrap up our assessment work and go into the decision, we'll see how we fared there. I think we have a lot of people that are watching to see how that goes. I think we have actually drummed up a lot of support for what we're trying to do here. So signing that decision is certainly going to be a huge milestone. And then after that, you know, maintaining that focus and that support, because in a condition-based NEPA style, a lot of the details come post-decision, and we've certainly heard from partners and stakeholders in the public about need for monitoring. We invite that monitoring, and in fact, it's crucial in a condition-based NEPA to conduct monitoring and be able to adjust and tweak our treatments as we move forward. Funding the work initially could be another challenge, fiscal challenge. I do see a lot of the aquatics work, people lining up, knocking on the door right now, wanting to line up and fund some of that aquatics work. The upland veg work, you know, we hope to get to the point where we're retaining enough receipts to pay for that future work, and we'll see how we fare initially, right? Getting getting some sales sold. And as Lloyd pointed out, that can be rather challenging with our haul distances. But those are some of the initial challenges I'm looking at right now. I think we've overcome a lot of the challenges thus far, sociopolitically. And so, yeah, signing that decision is going to be key.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And I think we have time for just one more question. And Lloyd, maybe this will be you, but if any of you can answer, is implementation realistic without mill processing infrastructure?
Well, the answer to that is yes. It is realistic because the mills need this wood, and particularly from the west side, with the lack of timber sales that are coming out on the west side because of marble mineral protection on DNR and so forth. The west side mills are reaching over to the east side to try to supplement their inventory, and so they are definitely looking at these projects. And you know, I'm saying there could be 4 stewardship contracts that come out of this one planning area, and everybody wants to, you know, bid on that if the price is right. And so our economics subgroup has been working with the Forest Service and trying to develop the economic portion to make it successful enough that we will have bidders. And we also have a lot of sawmills that are part of our collaborative, and you know, they participate. And American Forest Resource Council represents many mills, and you know, has been very active in our you know, collaboration and as a member of our collaborative.
All right, thank you, Lloyd. And I think that just about does it for our time.